Gray finally got a major win in the most recent chapters of Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest, something that he was way too overdue for in the course of this sequel, outside some minor stuff. But Gray finally got some really nice attention and an actual win against a major opponent, and I am happy for it. However, the events and the course of how he got that win was definitely something that did kind of divide the fan base, and also based off of my own comment section of the previous chapter review, it is incredibly, for the most part, kind of divisive on how Gray won. And a lot of people don't fully understand what happened. Even I didn't fully understand how this worked, but after a week of going back to the chapters and just going back on how Gray's powers work, I believe I understand what happened with Gray in the previous chapter and how his power-up, I'm using quotation marks here to emphasize what I mean by power-up is not a traditional power-up in the way that many people believe it might be. And also, I'm just going to say right now how it was presented, the execution and way it progressed for us to get to this point of Gray's legitimate new utilization and power-up technically of his abilities was not done the best, and I'll get into that bit of criticism later on in the video, so don't jump to conclusions just yet, wait for my explanations for anything. But before we get into my explanation of the fact, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel, and shows you want to see more. Also, if you didn't know, I have a second channel, GW Comics, where I talk about American comic books, and right now I'm talking about the most recent issues of Absolute Martian Manhunter, Absolute Green Lantern, Absolute Flash, as well as having a much larger video for Absolute Batman's opening issues currently in the works and should be out in the next few weeks, so look forward to that. It's a lot of fun, it's a passion project of mine, I would really appreciate it if you guys would go and check it out. Link will be in the title card in the description down below. Now with that out of the way, let's just jump right into this explanation. So over the course of the last two chapters, Gray attempted to fight the Gold Dragon God Viernus. And in chapter 181 and 182, Gray not only fought Viernus at the later stages one-on-one, and this is Viernus' human form and seemingly stronger thanks to the Dragonification Revival spell, but Gray managed to just take on Viernus one-on-one. Gray tried using every form of ice make magic he could use with his Devil Slayer magic powering him up with his demon mode, but it did nothing to Viernus. And it came to the point where Gray was wondering if he could do anything to Viernus. He came up with the concept of making ice that can burn, and at first we weren't sure how that would work because ice is cold, and I initially thought that it would be just a type of freezer burn. But that isn't the case. Not only did he try to make ice that could burn, but when that literally did not work and Viernus just undid it in an instant, Gray ended up freezing the air around them, making it impossible for the two of them to breathe for long, and even kept Viernus from using alchemy. Now, why did that keep Viernus from using alchemy? I'm planning on making a full video explaining alchemy in Fairy Tail, at least at a little point later in the future, but all you gotta know is that alchemy requires you knowing a specific material and how it's utilized, and being able to alchemize it, being able to warp, change, and create something by knowing the baseline materials. And more ideally, alchemists tend to use magical items and such to make stronger materials and to alchemize a lot more frequently. Which is how Viernus was able to not only take on Gray's ice magic and black magic with the Devil Slayer magic and undo it multiple times with ease, because he understood the material, he was able to undo it. But the fact that he wasn't able to fully utilize alchemy in that state with the air frozen is that there was nothing much for him to just take and change. The air being frozen makes it very likely that Gray froze the ether nano in the air, and ether nano are just very minuscule particles, and they're a bit thicker in Giltina. So just like when Gray, after acquiring Devil Slayer Magic Tartarus, managed to freeze over a wide area of Bane particles, microscopic airborne particles that are very hard to see unless in large quantities, Gray, and in this instance, managed to most likely freeze the air around them and the ether nano, causing Viernus not to have a substance that he could end up alchemizing and transmuting. But this is somewhat of a red herring, because Gray most likely created ice that Viernus wasn't familiar with. Which brings us to the most recent chapter of Fairy Tail 100 Years Quest, chapter 182, where Gray created black ice, and in this one panel says that he made Devil Slayer magic. Now this made Devil Slayer magic, quote, is what interests me the most. And with how the previous chapter had Gray trying to utilize his maker magic in a way that is new and refreshing, this instance, with him creating this Devil Slayer magic and this black ice to actually affect Viernus and not do anything, is Gray tapping into the true essence and full potential of maker magic as a whole. Gray's base magic is Ice Make Magic, which is a variation of maker magic utilizing the element of ice, which Gray learned as a kid from his master Ur. And with how maker magic works, most of the time people require a type of basis element to use maker magic with these multiple iterations. Like we have wood make, we have fire make now with Lekka, we have ice make obviously. There was a time when there was water make, and we got Rufus from Sabretooth's memory make magic. But the constant of every type of maker magic, and to a much lesser extent with memory make, is imagination and improvisation and creativity. That's how Gray became such a well-versed master of maker magic, because he's able to think of stuff on the fly and make things in an instant with his ice make magic, whether it be items or just sheer area spanning attacks. But with what maker magic can do, Gray, most likely, based off how he tried to make ice that could burn, tried to change the property of his ice. Use his abilities as a maker wizard to change the property and create a new type of ice. An ice that Viernus wasn't familiar with, so that he couldn't change it with alchemy. And with Gray saying he made Devil Slayer magic, this can mean one of a few things. Either A, he literally created a new type of Devil Slayer magic for himself that would work against Viernus, which is why the ice is black, not blue or even purple, like how in the anime Devil Slayer magic is portrayed with. But he created a new type of magic with maker magic in order for it to work against Viernus, and obviously got powered by the Dragon Slayer seal, allowing it to actually deal damage to Viernus, or at least knock him back. It's added to his baseline Devil Slayer magic. Or, the possibility that I think is the most interesting and the most creative usage of maker magic, is that Gray, with his knowledge of just ice magic and Devil Slayer magic, upgraded his own Devil Slayer magic by using his ice maker magic as a whole, to create a whole new type of Devil Slayer magic, Devil Slayer ice, as a type of ice and material that is completely foreign to Viernus, that he came up with on the fly and added to his repertoire in order to be something new and original, a type of ice that could harm a dragon. Because, like I said, maker magic is based off of imagination and creativity. That is the basis of this type of magic power. It's also a type of molding magic, so you can literally mold things. And that's also how alchemy tends to work. It works like a very high intensity form of maker magic. And since maker magic is the baseline of all the other types, like Gray's ice make magic, it's very possible that Gray, with his familiarity of the magic that he's seen and utilized and felt, managed to create a whole new type of magic that was never seen before. Which is incredibly overpowered if Gray can fully utilize this to create new spells and magic off the cuff based on what he knows. That is an insane feat for Gray. Now this, like I said in the beginning, it's not a traditional power-up, as he didn't gain a power boost. All he did was create a new power from the resources in his disposal. And if you want to go a step further, I don't believe this is the case, but if by some way this is, Gray could have also either learned alchemy in that instance, which I will say would be full-on BS because Gray has never practiced alchemy and he wouldn't be able to do this off the cuff, or Gray managed to do this due to what he saw people do using alchemy and applied that method to his own maker magic to create the black ice, to create this new Devil Slayer magic that could affect the Dragon God. And as Gray was using this power on Viernus, it didn't start to affect Viernus until the Dragon Slayer seal on him began to glow bright, with Wendy noticing that his power is being infused with Dragon Slayer magic. But that's an interesting thing to think about. Gray already had the Dragon Slayer trait on him to begin with, but only now it's affecting Viernus. Honestly, with how Gray had created a new type of Devil Slayer magic, perhaps he used the Dragon Slayer power that was already within him from the seal, and used his Maker magic to combine that with his new type of Devil Slayer magic, a sort of combination of Slayer magics, in order for it to not only be a boost of power, but make it more effective against Viernus. Because something that we all forget is that Devil Slayer magic can affect dragons to an extent. Because during the Sun Village arc, right before Tartarus, the Hellfire Dragon Atlas Flame, despite him being old, was still a very powerful dragon. We learned that Gray's dad, Silver Fullbuster, managed to completely ice over and freeze the Dragon Atlas Flame. A literal dragon, and over time it sapped away his life force by being encased in the ice for so long. It didn't fully affect him, but the fact that it froze a dragon, even weak dragons have a very high resistance to most types of magic in the world of Fairy Tail, because dragons are just that overpowered in this universe. But the fact that Devil Slayer magic could have affected a lower tier dragon with a bit of a power boost, and even adding on the Dragon Slayer attribute towards it, and Gray mixing it with his Devil Slayer magic for this new type of Devil Slayer magic they created, this new black ice, most likely is why Viernus was affected by this, to not give him back enough and dealing enough damage for the Lacrima to burst out from him. Gray, at this point, is probably a master maker wizard, a master of this new way of utilizing his ice make magic in a very creative way, taking the basis of what maker magic is, and perhaps with an inspiration from alchemy, created something brand new. And that is fascinating, it is cool, it is amazing, and it gives Gray the literal boost that he needs to be back in the top tiers with Natsu again, because he's just been dogged down for a long time. But enough of me explaining and gushing over this potential way of Gray using his powers, and this explanation that I, after going back, see makes sense for him to do. Let me give you my absolute criticism over this power boost, because I know regardless, people are going to bitch about it in the comments section, and I'm not going to lie, I will 100% agree with a lot of these comments, but there are still going to be comments that ignore what I say for the explanation of the abilities. So let me just go in and say this. I don't think Gray should have won that fight in a flat-out 1v1 towards the end. Yes, Selene, you could say that Selene managed to do some damage to Viernus, and Viernus wasn't taking Gray seriously until the very last moment. Fine, I understand that. But I do feel like that after the air froze, Viernus should have been like, you know what, fuck it. I'm going to kill you right now. I don't want to waste any more time on you. I had my fun, yada yada yada. And then have Gray do something to maybe break that magic seal on Selene, or whatever. But I feel like it would have been better for a team up against Viernus. And even though Selene is weaker, with the more exhausted, with the Lacrima extracted from her, she could have at least done something to give Gray a boost, help him in the fight to an extent, maybe use the teleportation to help him out. I like Gray that got a W, but I feel like Gray should have had some assistance on this matter, because this does kind of feel like bullshit that he beat a Dragon God 1v1, despite not being a on the level of the Dragon Gods by himself in terms of raw physical power to begin with. Because at the end of the day, it just feels way too quick and a bit too easy. I have to say this myself. I didn't say it much in the chapter review, but it is way too easy for Gray to have done this by himself towards the end, even with a very creative and fresh take on his powers that he came up with by tapping into the true essence of what Maker Magic is supposed to be. But here comes my biggest criticism of Gray's win, and that is, this was done not only too fast, but we didn't get any real explanation or real build-up for this. Now, fans have been speculating Gray to get a power-up in terms of learning how to use alchemy, which I think would have been really cool. It would have made Gray an absolute unit. But it would have made sense with how quickly things progressed within the story of 100 Years Quest. Things go from event to event without much time for Gray to, perhaps learn something about alchemy or do anything new, because the events just go right back to back and we haven't had any real training. And even during this fight, the only real indication of Gray coming up or finding a new way to use Maker Magic, with him being a Maker Wizard, and that's the literal vocabulary that is used, was in chapter 181 when he tried to make ice that could burn, like Natsu's, to be able to crack Viernus' scales. Which is something that Natsu wasn't able to do until he had a power boost in Dragon Force with everybody else's magic power that they had left boosting him in that instance. And then, even then, Natsu was only able to do it with devouring the gold flame of Viernus, but that's a whole other thing. then he froze the air, and then in this fight, he came up with this new version of Devil Slayer magic and created it all on his own. And it didn't seem like we didn't have any real build-up or foreshadowing for him to come up with this idea. We didn't get the lead-in of logic for him to come up with this idea and power. While this is cool, while this is a great boost to his power, and once he fights the wizard that will now have dragon powers as well, it will be really interesting to see how that'll play out with this new power-up. I have my issues because this is something that, while it's very rare in Fairy Tail, even in 100 Years Quest, it just feels like Mashima has a bit of an issue sometimes when it comes to properly explaining power boosts and just new ways of people using their powers. Because while in baseline Fairy Tail, there was a lot of explanations as to how things could progress, as well as getting full explanations as why these abilities can work, there are times when you're like, I feel like we could have led into this a bit better and given more evidence for this to be the case. And this power-up essentially from Gray is an issue. And I really feel like we could have had some inks of foreshadowing for Gray getting this power, for him using his abilities in this way. We know Maker Magic is relatively overpowered with the depths of its potential, but the fact we didn't get any real indication of Gray trying out new things or taking inspiration from alchemy, which he has had experience with 2 and now 3 arcs in a row, really feels like a huge missed opportunity to showcase his willingness to grow, because part of his arc 800 Years Quest is him living for others so he can make them happy. That is something different from the contrast of his self-sacrificial nature of the mainline Fairy Tail, and I feel like this power boost would be a really good indication of that. And we did somewhat get this in this fight. But I really have my issues with the execution and progression to get to this point, because it just feels like we skipped like 2 steps, getting from step 1 to step 4 or 5 or whatever, and it just feels like we skipped a few things along the way. And I really would have appreciated if Mashima had the extra time to just flesh this out a bit more, or at least give more inks of foreshadowing between arcs to lead up to this potential moment. But yeah, those are my thoughts and explanation on Gray's brand new abilities and utilization of his powers. While how it's seemingly done and what it could essentially be is really cool and has boatloads of potential and makes Gray even more of a powerhouse if he can truly utilize this even more with the full potential of Maker Magic. My issue is the execution and the fact that they kind of missed a couple steps along the way, and I really wish Mashima took some extra time to foreshadow all this. But it is what it is. I have my issues, but whatever. I'm fine with it right now. I'm just glad that Gray got a W and that he got an ability that could really make him a true asset in the upcoming fights. But you let me know in the comment section down below what you think of Gray's new abilities and how do you feel about the execution of this and how the fight went. And let me know in the comments also what other points of potential that Gray's Maker Magic can have now that this seems to be where his abilities and growth in terms of power is going to be. And once more, if you haven't already, like and subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos. Really helps, and it shows you guys enjoy the content I make here on the channel and shows you want to see more. Now with all that said and done, I hope you all have an awesome day.